Now, this Sefer, Shalmei Nachum, is an analysis of various commentaries on the Torah, but especially on the Ramban. That's his forte. And the Ramban at the beginning of Parshas VaYakhel, this week's Parsha, quotes a very wild mechilta. And the Ramban makes a big deal about this mechilta. What happens is, if you have a chumash and you open it up to Parshas VaYakhel, you'll see that immediately after VaYakhel, it says, Lo sevaru eish bechol moshvosechem biyom HaShabbos. In other words, besides the general Isur, which is written in the previous pasuk, that's Lamed Hey pasuk Beis, Ubeyom HaShvi Yilachem Kodesh, Shabboson, Shabbos Shabboson Lashem, Kol HaOseh B'Malacha Yumas, the Torah specifies and enumerates explicitly one particular lav and one particular malacha out of the 39 malachas, and that's the malacha of Havoras Eish.
Like a klal prat?
Well, not really, because a klalu prat means that the prat is coming to shed a light on the klal.
On the klal, right.
In this case, at least the way the Mechilta understands it, the Lo Sevaro Eish is coming to tell me that the malacha of Havoras HaEish is a malacha on Shabbos. And Rabbi Nosson in the Mechilta, one of the Tanoim, wants to know why did the Torah feel compelled to specify this malacha of Havoras Eish? It should be part of the general category of malachos. Do you follow the question? It's Rabbi Nosson.
I do. I see now. Rabbi Nosson
Loma Nemar, meaning it should be included in all the malachos. Why did the Torah feel compelled to spell this out? And again, you could come up with a myriad of answers to this question, but Rabbi Nosson has a very, very peculiar and particular approach, which I call revolutionary. And he says the following. Now, you have to understand one thing, and that is the word Shomea Ani. Those two words in Chazal mean ahava mina. Shomea meaning I might think. He says, Lefishu Omer VaYakhel Moshe's Kol Adas B'nei Yisrael. The opening pasuk of this parsha is VaYakhel Moshe's Kol Adas B'nei Yisrael. Shomea Ani, I would think, I would entertain that Yehei Rashoy Lahadlik Loas Haner, he would be allowed to light a candle, create a fire, Lahat Min Loas Hachamin, and put his, cholent pot on top of the fire. Velasos Madura b'Shabbos. Madura is usually like a bonfire when it's very cold. Then to heat up the room, they didn't have heating the way we have it, so they would light a fire. Talmud Lomar Lo Sevaro Eish Bechol Moshvosechem B'Yom HaShabbos. That's the end of the statement of Rabbi Nosson. So just to summarize, we find in the Mechilta Havamina that one would be permitted to light a fire for the purpose of either heating up the room or of cooking something. Pretty way out, no? A Havamina that you'd be allowed to do a malacha simply because you're uncomfortable or because you want to prepare food. And the Ramban says that Shalo hayu malachas halalu shehein hanos haguf bichlal isur rishon. That the Havamina was that these malachos that are being done for hanos haguf, for the purpose of physical pleasure, would not be included in the isur malacha. That's the Havamina of Shomei Ani. Adayin kol malachas ha'adam shenene bahen v'eina osim el hanos haguf kigon adlokas ner umadura urechitzas gufo b'chamin yu mutaros. The Havamina was that all these malachas for hanos haguf would be permissible. And now adds 4 words. Ki zeh me'oneg Shabbos. Those are the words you want to underline. I know that there's a way of doing that also on the line, but I don't know how to do that. Shani, you know how to do that?
No.
No? But sometimes you send me a text and you circle it like.
I do a screenshot and then I write on it.
Oh, a screenshot. Okay, I don't know. I'll
But
have
for
to
a
learn
different
that
time.
technology.
For next time.
So those are the key words in the Ramban. Ki zeh me'oneg Shabbos. Lekach nemar. Charlie, you gonna be in touch with me?
Yes, sure.
Lekach
Let's do the underline for a different time, Rav.
Lekach nemar lo sevaru eish lesar hakol. The Torah went out of its way to formulate the Isser of Havaras Eish, to prohibit Havaras Eish, even when it's for the sake of Oneg Shabbos. So it comes out according to the Ramban in this Mechilta, when there's a conflict between Oneg Shabbos and violating a Malach of Shabbos, we would entertain the possibility that for the sake of Oneg Shabbos, we're going to override the Shabbos. Pretty wild, no? I mean, if somebody said that in Rav Soloveitchik's class, he'd get thrown out. I'm telling you. A Havamina that for the sake of
You
Oneg
get thrown out
Shabbos.
for not having learned the Mechilta already.
Right,
Right, you should have known that Mechilta.
right. But if, let's say, you lived at the time before the Mechilta and you saw the Pasuk Lo Sevaru Eish, and the Rebbe asks, why did the Torah have to prohibit this? And you would say, oh, because of Oneg Shabbos, we'd be allowed to violate the Shabbos. That's crazy.
Well, you'd look in the Iglay Tal and it would tell you not to do it.
But the entire Isser of Oneg Shabbos, I'm sorry, the entire mitzvah of Oneg Shabbos is only based on a pasuk in Yeshayahu Novi, which we call Midivrei Kabbalah. It's not even a mitzvah that's written in the Torah. And I don't believe that Oneg Shabbos is counted amongst the Taryag mitzvahs. What do you say?
No, I recall that Reb Tzadok is kolek on the Ramban about what's the makor of Oneg Shabbos, I think, but I don't remember the whole thing.
But be that as it may, we have to add another question here. Not only this Havamina is very difficult, but why is this Havamina based on the pasuk VaYakhel Moshe es kol adas b'nei Yisrael? What did the Mechilta see in that pasuk that led him to the conclusion that for the sake of Oneg Shabbos, we would violate Meleches Havara, or for that matter, maybe any Melech? So here we turn to page Shin Yud Daled, which is the second page that you have. And we're going to look at the Ramban, who says the following. Here at the beginning of VaYakhel, the Ramban says that we're dealing, and Moshe Rabbeinu is addressing the mitzvah of Asiyas Meleches HaMishkan. Ela Dvar Masher Tziva Hashem Lasos, Meleches HaMishkan, V'chol Keilah V'kol Avodasa. If you had to give a koteret, a title to this parsha that we're learning, VaYakhel, the title would be Asiyas Meleches HaMishkan. So why is Shabbos here at the beginning of VaYakhel? Says the Ramban, Hikdim Shabbos Lemar Ki Sheishes Yomim Tasa Melacha. You could be involved in Meleches HaMishkan for 6 days of the week, but v'lo b'yom hashvi, but not on the 7th day. Hu kodesh l'Hashem. Umikan she'ein Meleches HaMishkan doche Shabbos. Okay. Now, let's just summarize what we have. We have a Havamina in the Mechilta that for Oneg Shabbos we would violate the Shabbos, and that's why the Torah had to add Lo Sevaru Eish. We know that this parsha, the title, the subject of this parsha is Meleches HaMishkan, And the Torah introduces Shabbos through the back door. That's not the main topic of this parasha. Shabbos is only introduced here to teach us that Shabbos does not override, that Melechet HaMishkan does not override the Shabbos. Now, we're going to ask another question. When the Torah here at the beginning of VaYakhel prohibits Malacha, it uses a double language, two phrases. It says, Yom HaShvi Yelachem Kodesh, that's number one. And number two, Shabbos Shabbosam. What is the difference between the two? The Torah is not just being, poetic license here with being overly verbose. Every word counts. What's the difference between Kodesh and Shabbos Shabbosam?
Yom Kippur, fasting on Yom Kippur to override Oneg Shabbos, is what I recall.
I'm not sure if I understand what you're saying. That Yom Kippur overrides.
That's a Shabbaton. That's the only drasha I recall. I mean, that's.
Shabbaton, yeah, in the case of Yom Kippur, but now we're talking about Shabbos. In the case of Yom Kippur, it could be Shabbos Shabbosan tells me that you have to enjoin. You're enjoined from all the categories of Inu. The 5 categories of affliction. Now,
to do a dafka on Shabbat, right? So maybe by calling the Shabbaton also, it would. But anyhow, that's what the first thing that comes to my mind. I didn't.
Right, but again, in Shabbat there's no Iser Inui, so we have to figure out what Shabbaton means, and how it's different than the word Kodesh. Now, there's another problem here. If you're on the same page as me, in the paragraph that starts with the word Vehine, he quotes on the 4th line a pasuk in Kitisa, earlier in Shmos, and there it says, Shabbos Shabbosan Kodesh. Notice the switch in the sequence, in the order. The same 2 phrases appear, Kodesh and Shabbos Shabbos, but in the opposite, in the reverse order. In Kitisa, it says Shabbos Shabbosan Kodesh. Here in VaYakhel, it says Kodesh Shabbos Shabbosan. And that's a problem. So we don't know what the difference is between Shabbos, Shabbosan on the one hand, and Kodesh on the other hand. Nor do we know why there's a switch in the order of these 2 terms if we compare and contrast VaYakhel to Kitisa. The difference between Kodesh and Shabbos Shabboson is the following. The word Kodesh, as the Ramban explains in Parshat Yisro, refers to that dimension of Kedusha Shabbos that generates Iser Malacha. So because of the Kedusha of Shabbos, we are enjoined from involvement in any of 39 Malachos. That's called Kodesh. So again, we have an equation. I'd write it up on the board over here. Kodesh equals Iser Malacha. What is Shabbos Shabboson? Shabbos Shabboson is a different concept. And the root of the word is Shvisa. Shvisa means rest. And the Ramban is going to give you'll see this on page Shin Tes Vav, which is the 3rd page that you have. And this is the Ramban in Parshas Emor. He has a long presentation about what Shabbos Shabbosan means. What does it mean to rest? To be in a state of rest, of Shvisa. I'm not talking about labor unions, and striking and all that,
Yeah.
But Shvita in the sense of rest. And the Ramban says the following: a person could fulfill the mitzvah of Kodesh and abstain from any involvement in Malacha, but yet, how does he spend his entire Shabbos? He's Toreach Kol Hayom. he exerts all his energy for the entire Shabbos. Limdod atvuos, he weighs the volume of his grains, v'lishkol aperos. Or, for example, he fills up his barrels of wine. He moves kalim from place to place, stones from his house to another house. And he spends his entire day dedicated to tircha. He's hardly in a state of rest. I myself, a member of my family, would spend our entire Shabbos almost looking at the kitchen and seeing how to move, or the living room, how to move the furniture from place to place. And then you end up with a day of Isur Malacha because he didn't violate any Malacha, but he's not in a state of Shabbosan. He's not in a state of Menucha. So Shabbos Shabbosan tells us that you have a mitzvah, not just an Isur Malacha to abstain from Malacha, but a positive command to achieve a state of Shvisa. And that state of Shvisa is ordained and can be called Menucha on Shabbos without Tircha, the opposite of Tircha, through Shabbos Shabbosan. So we have two dimensions of Shabbos. We have the dimension of Kodesh, which is Isur Malacha, and Shabbosan, which is a positive command to achieve a state of Menucha. And we're going to assume now, as we'll soon see in the Ramban, that Oneg Shabbos is a sniff, how do you say in English, an extension or a branch of the mitzvah of Shabbos Shabbosan. Not only Oneg Shabbos, but even Kiddush, right? Zachar Yom Shabbos L'Kadsha. All these positive dimensions of Shabbos fit under the category of Shabbos Shabbosan. And that's what the Ramban writes. You'll see this on page 4, if you receive page 4, in his commentary on the pasuk of Kedoshim Tiyu. The Ramban says that after the Torah gave us all the details and the specific categories of Isur Arayos, then as a general rule, in a positive command, the Torah says Kedoshim Tiyu. Above and beyond the specifics and abstaining from immorality in all the various categories of arayos, there's a positive command to create a state of Kedusha, of Kedoshim Tiyu. And the Ramban adds V'chein Binyan Shabbos. And there's an exact corresponding parallel in Shabbos, that there's an Isur Malacha, and that's a Lav, and we have 39 of them, like the Arayos. And then we have B'tircha B'yeseh. The Torah now says, wait a minute, it's not enough to abstain from all these categories. Like in Kedoshim Tiyu, it's not sufficient that you abstain from all these arayos and involvement there, and you have to reach a state of Kedoshim Tiyu. Shenia Prushim and Amutaros. And in a parallel way in Shabbos, it's not enough to abstain from all the 39 Isurim Malacha, but you also, which is called Kodesh, but you also have to get to a state of Tishbos, a positive state of Menucha, of experiencing the Shabbos. And now, okay, you don't have these pages, I don't think, but let's just see how much time we have. We still have a few more minutes. Now, we're going to introduce a principle which is formulated by the Gemara in Brachos Daf Chaf Amud Beis, in which the Gemara formulates a rule that is going to prove, and from which we will derive, that nashim, that women, are included in the mitzvah of Kiddush, and also in all the branches, the shoot-offs of Kiddush, namely Oneg Shabbos, the Isur Tircha on Shabbos, Shabbos Shabboson. And what is the principle formulated by the Gemara in Brachos to derive the chiyuv of nashim in Kiddush? in the two Aseres Hadibros, there's a discrepancy. In one it says Zachar es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadshu, and the other it says Shomer es Yom HaShabbos. And the Gemara says Zachar v'Shomer b'Dibur Echad Nemru. And both Shomer and Zachar were said in one enunciation to teach us that Kol She'yeshno b'Shmira, Yeshno b'Schira. Shmira refers to Kodesh, refers to abstaining from Malacha. Zechira is the positive command of Shabbos, the Shabbos Shabboson element. Women are included under Shmira, under the requirement to abstain from Malacha, and therefore, Kol Sheyeshno b'Shmira, Yeshno b'Schira, they're included under Kiddush and under the Mitzvah Saseh of Shabbos, which means that women are obligated in Onik Shabbos and in Kiddush on Shabbos, and they enjoin from overly exerting themselves with tircha, and they are included in both Kodesh and Shabbos Shabboson. But what generates the Shabbos Shabboson? Do you follow what I'm asking? Where is it anchored? What is the jumping off point from which we get to the conclusion that women are obligated in the positive dimensions of Shabbos? And the answer is Shomar. It comes from Shomar, from Kodesh, from the Isser Malacha, which definitely includes the women. We arrive at the conclusion that there's a chiyuv of Shabbos Shabboson. Kodesh is going to generate Shabbos Shabboson. Shabbos Shabboson is a result of and is generated by the chiyuv Shamar, namely the Isser Malacha. So we have like an entity that's indivisible, that's made up of two parts that are integrated into one whole, and that's called Shmira and Zechira. Both together, Shmira and Zechira become one entity of Shmira Shabbos. Kodesh, that means Shamar, Isser Malacha, and Shabbos Shabboson, which includes Zachar es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho, and V'Karasel Shabbos Oneg, and the positive dimensions of Shabbos. Now we go back to the Ramban at the beginning of VaYakhel. The Ramban says, what is the pasuk VaYakhel Moshe es Kol Adas B'nai Yisrael? What's the ribui and the emphasis on Kol Adas B'nai Yisrael? Says the Ramban, Kol Adas B'nai Yisrael is coming to be Marben Noshim, that the women are also included under Meleches HaMishkan, and therefore they're included under Shabbos. And basically, the mitzvah of Shabbos, originally, back in Parshat Ki Tisa, was addressed to the men and not to the women. It's only here in VaYakhel that we have the principle that women are obligated in Shabbos. And that obligation is derived from the pasuk of VaYakhel Moshe's Kol Adas B'nai Yisrael, according to the Ramban, to include the Nashim. In the original tzivui of Shabbos, only the men were addressed. Here in VaYakhel, now the ladies are being addressed. And why are they being addressed? Because they're included in the obligation of Asiyas HaMishkan, and therefore they're included in Shabbos. So this is Moshe Rabbeinu addressing men and women. And the thesis of the Ramban is that here in Parshas VaYakhel, it's going to say Kodesh and then Shabbos Shabboson. Why Kodesh first and Shabbos Shabboson second? Because Kol Sheyeshno b'Shamar, Yeshno b'Zachar. Kodesh represents Shamar. Kodesh is the Kedusha that generates the Isser Malacha. Women are included in Kodesh, and therefore they are likewise included in Shabbos Shabboson, which means Kiddush and all the other positive dimensions of Shabbos. So it's critical for the word Kodesh to come before Shabbos Shabboson because we're addressing the lady folk. And we want to establish that they have a mitzvah of Zachar based on Shomar. Kol sheyeshno b'Shomar, yeshno b'Zachar. Kol sheyeshno b'Kodesh, yeshno b'Shabbos Shabboson. But in Parshas Kitisa, where the Torah is addressing the menfolk, and there's no pasuk Kol Hadas B'nei Yisrael, there it's going to say Shabbos Shabboson first, and then Kodesh, because the Torah is not teaching us that Shabbos Shabboson is anchored and rooted and generated by Kodesh, by Yisra Malacha. That principle comes to the fore only in Parshas VaYakhel, when Moshe Rabbeinu is teaching us that the women are included in this entity called Shabbos, the entity which is made up of Zachar and Shomar. But if we go back to Parshas Kitisa, then the Shabbos Shabboson and all the positive dimensions of Shabbos remain an independent entity unto themselves. They're not generated by Kodesh. So Shabbos Shabboson comes first as the mitzvah saseh, and then we have the mitzvah of the lotas called Kodesh of Yisra Malacha. Now we can perhaps shed a light on Rabbi Nosson from the Mechilta. How could there be a Havamina that for the sake of Oneg Shabbos, we're allowed to violate Melecha Shabbos? That we're going to light a candle for the sake of Hadas Haguf, which the Ramban identifies as Oneg Shabbos. What kind of Havamina is that? But the answer is that until this point at the beginning of VaYakhel, Shabbos Shabboson is a separate entity unto itself, which obligates only the men and not the women, because women are exempt from mitzvah seishas man groma. And at this point, Kodesh comes second. It's only after we introduce the women into the equation and they become obligated in the mitzvah of Shabbos Shabboson, then Kodesh comes first. Because then the Torah wants to integrate Shabbos Shabboson together with Kodesh to form one entity that's indivisible called Shabbos. Shmira Shabbos is now made up of two parts, but they're two sides of the same coin. But that Chiddush is written here in this parsha. But until we get to this parsha, we think and we are impressed by the fact that Shabbos Shabboson is a separate entity. And it's recorded first in the sequence in Parshas Kitisa. And as a separate entity, we might have come to the conclusion that for the sake of Shabbos Shabboson, we can even override and trump Kodesh. And that would mean that for the sake of the positive aspect of Shabbos, which is formulated by the Torah in the word Shabbos Shabboson, we can even override that element of Kodesh, which is the Yisra Malacha. And that's why the Torah had to write out Lo Tevaru Eish B'chol Moshvo Seichem, so that we get this straight. And what we understand from the Lo Tevaru Eish is that it's Kodesh first, and then Shabbos Shabboson. Shabbos Shabboson is an outcome. It's a secondary element in Shabbos that is generated by Kodesh. And certainly, for the sake of that secondary aspect of Shabbos Shabboson, we're not going to override the Kodesh, because Shabbos Shabboson is really anchored in Kodesh. And so we begin to understand that this parsha is teaching us that women are obligated in Meleches HaMishkan. They're included in Shabbos, and they're included in Shabbos under the category of Kodesh, Shabbos Shabboson. Okay, then this is where we'll stop for today.
Yeah, I have to think for a second.
Yeah. Think it over.
If you have a Pri Tzaddik, in the Chelik Aleph of Pri Tzaddik is printed like a quarter of the Sefer is called like Kuntras Kedusha Shabbos, I think. And I didn't learn hardly any of it, but I'm pretty sure he's cholek on this Ramban.
Yeah.
And it took him, it's like 100-page kuntra. I mean, it's a huge It's like you could have printed it as its own sefer, and instead it's in the Pri Tzaddik. And I this is the same, issue.
Do you know which dimension of the Ramban